A question I get asked literally none of the time is, Willow, you're a gorgeous spooky girl, and thank you, I know. But how do you do it? How can I be a spooky girl too? How do I get ready for spooky season? How do I be the best spook that I can be? And I really don't think all of the 0 people who ask me this question are actually prepared for the answer. It's not easy. There are a lot of rituals that go into it, a lot of forbidden things. And yes, some of them can be fun, like you wouldn't believe the amount of time you have to spend playing with a black and white cat in order to really understand the black and white aesthetic for spooky season, but we do what we have to. I can't pretend that it doesn't help if you have a mostly black wardrobe. If you happen to be gay or some flavor of queer, that really does help. If you happen to be trans people are just spookier than everyone else. We're cute little monsters. Being a cute little monster really helps you get ready for spooky season. But another thing you can do is read the right books. If you really want to be a cute spooky girl and get yourself ready for spooky season, reading the right books can go a long way. Every spooky season I drown myself in good spooky books. And now that we're finally in spooky season 2024, these are the books that I've read to really get me into spooky season this year, because every year is different, and even a gorgeous transgender monster girl like me still needs to get in the mood sometimes. We're not always ready to go. So here is this year's spooky secret. All of that said, being a spooky girl isn't just about reading the right books. It's also about aesthetics and mood. And you can conjure up the right mood with this video's sponsor, Serious Readers. Serious Readers make serious lights, and ever since receiving my own serious light, there is nothing else I will read by. Especially not The Sun, because The Sun is not spooky. The Sun is not the spooky vibe we're looking for. Serious lights provide spooky vibes. This beautiful, majestic thing is the ultimate Halloween reading tool. Serious lights use daylight wavelength technology, which replicates the daylight spectrum as closely as technically possible. With her dimmer switch and her adjustable field of vision, this serious light from Serious Readers hasn't just become an essential part of my reading experience, she's also become an essential part of our home. And I would not be the spooky reader that I am without this serious light. So click the link in the description and use the offer code WILLOW24 to get £100 off your own serious light. Thank you so much to Serious Readers for sponsoring this video. The first spooky ingredient in my spooky recipe to get me in the mood for spooky season was the newest novel by Andrew Joseph White, Compound Fracture. I am a big fan of Andrew Joseph White. Time and again, his books have proven that he is a force to be reckoned with when it comes to horror fiction. And if you're only just now discovering the appeal of spooky season and horror fiction, and no judgment if you are, we all get there eventually, Andrew Joseph White's books are a great place to start because they're YA horror. That doesn't mean they're not heavy, that doesn't mean they're not politically savvy, they all very much are, but being YA means that they have younger protagonists and they move at a really nice click. His first novel, Hell Followed With Us, takes place after the apocalypse, and we follow a group of young queers who are trying to fight back against the very doomsday cult that actually caused the apocalypse. His second novel, and my personal favourite, is The Spirit Bares Its Teeth, a piece of gothic historical fiction about a young trans guy with magical abilities who refuses to just become a bride, and for fighting back he is sent to an asylum for girls. But this year, as I said, for spooky season I read his newest book, Compound Fracture, something very different from the other two. This book is raw, it is unpleasant, and it's set in the modern day. It follows an angry young trans teenager who, when the book opens, is just about to come out to his parents as a trans guy. But Miles has also been digging into his community history, the history of his family and the people around him. See, this book is also very much about cycles of violence in working class communities and how that violence is passed on generation to generation. Miles's great-grandfather was a proud socialist miner who was publicly executed. And ever since that day 100 years ago, Miles's family have been looked at by the rest of their community in West Virginia with suspicion, and his family have gotten into feuds over and over again through the generations with another family in this neighborhood. And right now the head of that family is a cop, a sheriff who runs this entire town. Miles has dug up some information about Sheriff Davis that could maybe actually bury him and his family for good, because Miles is also trapped in this cycle of violence. But before he's able to do anything, the sheriff's son and his friends beat Miles to within an inch of his life, and then begins a journey of violent revenge. Miles is fueled by anger, but he has also just come out as trans to his parents, and they are struggling to accept him and his new identity. Miles is also autistic. Both of his parents are neurodiverse. He's also a proud socialist who looks up to his great-grandfather and the legacy he left behind. There's a lot going on in this book, and one of the most palpable things about it is that it is violent. This is a book full of fighting, torture, and murder. For a piece of YA fiction, this thing is visceral and raw and bloody and very, very visually uncomfortable at times, so you've been warned. It is not an easy read, but it is very much a pro-socialist, pro-working class, anti-police novel about not just queer liberation, but working class liberation as well. About breaking cycles of violence, or at least bringing them to an end as best we can. I am so glad I started my spooky season reading journey with this year. Compound Fracture was quite a meal, and my dessert was this. This is Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. A very, very curious 200-page novel that begins as a very flirtatious, very teasing, very tantalizing work of sapphic romance, which gradually begins to spiral into a far darker, much more toxic, Wuthering Heights-esque piece of tortured romance. And then in the book's second half, the horror element becomes clear. Although I guess that's not really true. It's not until the 11th hour that anything actually becomes clear. All the way through the second half of this novel, you have suspicions about what's really going on. You know there are secrets being kept. You might have theories as to what those secrets are. You might be right, you might be wrong, but either way, you will feel incredibly tense the entire time. All the way through reading the second half of this book, my jaw was set, my bones were clenched. I was stiff as a board reading this thing. I could not move until I'd finished it, until I'd fully understood what was going on here, and it was really, really chilling. Bloom follows a young woman called Ro, who has just taken a job as an assistant professor. She is a dedicated, lifelong student of academia, specifically literature. She recently went through a horrible breakup in New York City when she found out that her boyfriend had been cheating on her, and now she's taken this assistant professor opportunity at a small town university. And one Saturday, walking around the local farmer's market, she meets a woman selling cupcakes. This woman is Ash. Ash lives by herself in a farmhouse that she inherited from her grandmother, and in that farmhouse she bakes cupcakes, she makes handmade soap, she cooks incredible meals, and she brings everything that she makes to the farmer's market, and that gives her enough to live off. And Ro has never dated a woman before, but she is captivated by Ash. And this takes her by surprise. She'd never considered that she was queer before. But her obsession with Ash grows very, very quickly. And Ash openly flirts with her. This goes on for a little while. Eventually they start dating. But Ash is secretive. There is a lot she is not sharing with Ro. Ash has skeletons in her closet. Maybe literally, maybe not. And Ro is getting more and more paranoid that she doesn't know the whole truth about Ash, about who she is, who she was. Occasionally she shows her darker side to Ro, and Ro gets scared. She wants to know the truth about her girlfriend, but she doesn't know how, because Ash can be very toxic, very intimidating, and Ro is feeling more and more claustrophobic and trapped. Bloom is amazing. The only negative I'll say about it is the final 10% of the book, without spoiling anything, isn't written very well. There's a lot of dialogue in this big finale that comes across pretty cringe and awkward. Like it really needed a bit of editing because suddenly the dialogue just gets a bit cringe and the conclusion is enormous. It's terrifying, it's gross, it's brilliant, but the dialogue within it is written really badly and it took me out of it completely. But the final few pages really bring you back in with something truly shocking and uncomfortable. And I guess this is a spoiler, but I also feel like you deserve fair warning. This book does not have a happy ending at all. I feel like that's good to know. And finally, while it's not a horror novel, it is definitely the kind of thing to get you in the mood for spooky season. This is Lady Macbeth by Ava Reid. Now, until lockdown, when I started to really pay attention to how good of a play Julius Caesar is, Macbeth was my favourite Shakespeare play for years and years and years, ever since I read it in high school. I've read Macbeth countless times, I've seen a bunch of productions of it, I've been in it. I love Macbeth so much. I feel a particular attachment to the witches and to Lady Macbeth. I love the women of that play so much, and I did not hesitate in picking up a feminist retelling of Lady Macbeth's story. This thing is gothic, dark, historical fiction. It loosely follows Shakespeare's play, but is very much a retelling. In this book, Lady Macbeth is French, and she is on her way to Scotland to be married off by her father to the Thane of Glamis, Macbeth. She is a bright and capable young woman. She speaks multiple languages. She's very savvy, but she always has to wear this dark veil over her face because there are suspicions around her. She is so almost abnormally beautiful that men believe she has been touched by witches. She is cursed. Her looking upon a man might destroy him, might do terrible things to his mind. Men do not trust her simply because she is so strangely beautiful and also clearly very intelligent. Once she gets to Glamis and she meets Macbeth and Banquo, Banquo's son Fleance, the whole main cast, the story of the play begins to unfold, but pretty differently. For example, Macbeth does not meet the witches after a battle out in a murky field with Banquo by his side. Instead, he has the witches chained up in the basement of his castle. He opens up a wooden door and he shows Lady Macbeth the endless expanse of ocean beyond their hilltop castle. And there, in this room that is both stone and ocean at once, are these chained up witches who provide him with prophecies and he follows them. He is told that he will be the Thane of Cawdor and then the king, just like in the play. And in this book, Lady Macbeth is not the conniving puppet master behind everything Macbeth does. Macbeth himself is a brutish, bloodthirsty man, and she at the beginning just kind of helplessly tries to survive by pointing him in directions that she thinks will help her survival. All she's doing is poking around in the dark, trying her best to stay alive in this very dangerous, confusing situation. But as the book goes on, she finds herself a little bit more power hungry, a little bit more confident, realizing the power that she has and the fact that the men are afraid of her. And so she pushes a little bit further, and the Lady Macbeth that we know from the play starts to reveal herself. It's a wonderful piece of historical fiction that is a lot closer to what feels like historical fact than the play is. The play is particularly metaphysical and almost dark fairy tale-esque, whereas the book feels a little bit more grounded in reality. The witches are still there, they tell their prophecies, but they don't feel like as much of a force. Almost every character in this feels like someone who could have existed in 11th century Scotland, far more so than the ones we meet in the play. But that is also what I found kind of frustrating about this, because, to be blunt, this is not my Lady Macbeth. She's not the Lady Macbeth of the play, and I understand that this is a feminist retelling, but I don't buy that this book is particularly feminist. It feels a lot more true to history. She is a powerless woman who slowly realizes that she has a bit more strength than she initially thought she did. But the Lady Macbeth of the play is an unapologetically evil, dastardly, savvy, powerful woman who controls every movement of her pathetic coward of a husband in order to get the power that she craves. Lady Macbeth is an amazing protagonist, a wonderful evil villain that we follow so intimately throughout the play. Her strength, her courage, her arrogance, it is all so much fun. And this Lady Macbeth is not her. This is a frightened teenage girl who's been married off to a foreign leader and is just trying to survive. I enjoy her, I enjoy the book, but she's not Lady Macbeth. And I don't know if making her more realistically meek and out of her depth and slowly kind of rising to the occasion, I don't know how feminist that is compared to the Lady Macbeth of the play, who is such a wonderful puppet master of a cowardly yet powerful husband. I don't know. It's still a great book for spooky season though. Historical fiction set in the bleakest wilderness of Scotland, full of witchcraft and bloodshed, backstabbing and murdering and cutthroat survival. It is bleak, it is dark, there's not a shred of sunlight in this book. This is all about those spooky season vibes without being a horror book, and I think that's pretty important. To remember that spooky season can just be about vibes, it does not have to be about reading horror. Just read something that's dark, and this is dark. There you go, those are the books that I've been reading to get myself ready for spooky season 2024. Let me know what books you're reading this spooky season. And thank you again to Serious Readers for sponsoring this video. Subscribe for books.